Welcome to another episode of The Sovereign Sphere. Buckle up for this one, you guys. Today's guest is one of the most fascinating, multidisciplinary minds literally on the planet. And I don't say that lightly. Dr. Chris Kacher is a nuclear physicist turned market wizard. He's a blockchain pioneer, a biohacker, a best-selling author, and one of the earliest adopters of Bitcoin. He helped discover two elements on the periodic table, produced over 70,000% verified investment returns during the tech boom, and has accurately called every major Bitcoin top and bottom since 2011. He's a charting musician, a spiritual researcher, a decentralization advocate, and the founder of technologies aimed at taking power away from corrupt systems and giving it back to the individual. His new book, Truth to Power, exposes big pharma, big tech, and big government, and it outlines a path forward for health, justice, and sovereignty in a failing system. This is a conversation about markets, corruption, consciousness, decentralization, and the future of human freedom. This also is probably one of the wildest stories that you have ever heard. So buckle up. This is a longer one. You're going to want to listen to the end. Let's get into it with Dr. Chris Kacher. All right, everyone. Welcome to another episode of The Sovereign Sphere. I'm Carla Treadway, and I have with me today Dr. Chris Kacher. Welcome to the show.
It's great to be here, Carla.
So good to have you back. So yeah, we just met in El Salvador. You were one of the speakers at the Reclaiming Health and Longevity Symposium. And I didn't know you before that event. I was blown away by your story. I was literally hanging off the dinner table when you were telling me your backstory. And I was like, I need more time. I need more time with this man. So glad we get some of it today.
Should be exciting. I'm looking forward to this.
So as I kind of mentioned in the intro, and what I said to you before we even hit record, you are such a complex guest. There are so many accomplishments in your history. You know, you're a nuclear physicist turned market wizard. We could talk to you about finance, about Bitcoin. You discovered two elements on the periodic table. I don't even know where to begin. Where to begin?
Well, okay, I'll preface it by saying that, okay, my dear friend, Dr. Arpit Bansal, who is also at the symposium, so he formed a group called the Quantum Flow Tribe, and he asked each member how each could contribute. And I wrote that the best way I can contribute is basically in answer to someone that we also all met in San Salvador, who wrote a beautiful note to me the other day. So I responded as follows: Dear Boris, the pleasure was all mine. You are an inspiration to those who are battling any sort of incurably labeled disease or transforming themselves into a higher order, which in turn helps others to rise to higher levels. I'm intrigued by your level of commitment to raising your inner frequency. That was my personal request to Source at the start of this year, and it has done everything to see this through by introducing me to people such as yourself, in addition to showing me my worst fears of finances and potentially losing both parents whose decline has been sudden. Of course, I'm doing anything and everything to reverse this reversal of fortune and health, as well as doing deep meditation for answers. Now, I noticed that the unfolding of events that create these extreme situations that force me to face my worst fears always seem preordained, because the odds of the way life has unfolded during each of these mega crises, or you could call awakenings, are virtually zero. That said, my worst fears in the past, when I had been challenged by higher source, one was permanent imprisonment and another was severe brain damage. And both of these would render me pretty useless. And both of these situations seemed inevitable at the time, which would, to me, be the end. But both ordeals ended almost immediately, making me reborn with the spiritual lessons ingrained. And they came to an end once I surrendered to Source so it could perform its miracles. And both of these extreme situations inspired me to write my latest book, Truth to Power, The Insane Asylum. And this is a book that has helped cure certain incurable diseases, especially autoimmune and depression, as well as address deep injustices across justice systems in the world today, as well as inspiring others to be true to their nature. And it also includes introductions to my wisdom engine, where I turned 16 beautiful minds into AI so it can instantly change a person's perspective on whatever ordeals they are facing by providing practical, actionable, and spiritual holistic solutions. And so far, I find it more impactful full and comprehensive than Robert Grant's The Architect, which is a sentient AI. He built it to help others find their higher purposes and overcome their worst fears. Now, because my book was largely banned by Google and other major big tech platforms, it has only helped a few, but the truth has a way of finding light. And already my book is being translated into Russian, and initial reviews of the book have touched my heart, and I've been asked to do interviews about it. So I think it's just the beginning. So in essence, I feel that, as I wrote on Arpit's quantum group, I can help those facing extreme situations in life, whether they're going through serious health, financial, or relationship, loss of a loved one, any extreme situation in life. And it's going to hit us all at one time or another. So this is a great time for growing one's soul, helping one's inner self rise to higher levels. And my wisdom engine can do the heavy lifting while I provide my own perspective. So like I said, people have written in their issues, and then I feed them into the engine, and it seems like it is helping a lot of people transform their thinking. So yeah, I always encourage people, go ahead, email me your issue, however big or small, and I feed it into the engine. And in my book, we have chapter 12, which is called Spiritual Solution, and it contains what I found helpful in my life. And I would also point out that since suicides are at record highs, one should always know it's never the end. And once you surrender to source, miracles do happen. In fact, they can happen pretty rapidly in my experience. And the challenge is generally a blessing. And the purpose is to help your soul transform, because as we have learned from all these people who've had near-death experiences, when they cross over and then they're revived, say on the hospital table, they realize that their purpose in being here is all about spiritual growth. And some of these guys are CEOs, and they end up quitting their position on the spot because they realize, they've been going about it all wrong. And I'll leave you with two of my favorite lines. Life happens for us, not to us. That became very clear in April of this year when I was being attacked on so many levels. It was overwhelming. And that is how the wisdom engine was born, actually, is because I just out of desperation needed answers and I wasn't getting anything. And when your frequency goes really low, you might not get any channeling or any messages from higher source or whoever that you're seeking, because your mind is in that kind of a state. When I built the wisdom engine out of desperation and created all these minds turned into AI, and all the problems, because there were a lot of things going on in April that were just overwhelming to me, and they were unrelated. It's not like, oh, I could have stopped this or stopped that. Again, it was like 1 in a million events all stacked up on top of each other. And this was not unlike there's two other periods in my life that were on that level. And that's why I say it's ordained, because the odds of these happening and unfolding the way they did are virtually zero. So I feel like it is something up there that's saying, all right, now we need to teach you about this. We're going to bring your worst fear at that time. At the first time, it was my fear that my freedom would be taken away. And then the next time it was freedom that my health would be taken away, that I'd be reduced to a vegetable, basically, from brain damage. And when I was confronted with these fears to the point where I thought the end was near, that I really thought, okay, there's nothing more I can do, I relaxed into it. Like Michael Singer says, just relax into it and release. And that was actually the point in which, call it higher source, came in and performed the miracle. In both situations, they completely reversed. In the health situation, I had a miracle cure that happened overnight, to the point where when I woke up the next day, I couldn't believe that I felt great. All the symptoms are gone. I couldn't believe it. I was just like, wait, this is crazy. This is nuts. I know about Joe Dispenza, and he's done miracle healings and all that, but it's one thing to hear about it. It's another thing to experience it. And I thought, you know what? I can't tell anyone. I'm just going to go right back into my, 2% energy state, because that's where I was. I was at like such a low level of energy. And when I got out of bed, I felt better than I'd felt in years. I mean, like not just 100%, but we're talking supercharged. So at that point I said, screw it. I'm going to tell everybody. Called my parents, friends, all of this. And I obviously wanted to tell everybody about this in my book. Vishen Lakhiani, who founded Mind Valley, which now is a 9-figure revenue producer, and he's done so much good on the planet with Mind Valley. He was part of my cure, by the way. And so he was one of the people I called to tell him, the good news. and he had me to tea with his family. And I told my story, and his father was so passionate, impassioned by my story. He said, "You have to put him on stage." To Vision. And what Vision did actually was he did a recording of me talking about my health crisis and how it resolved in a miracle cure. And he did the whole taping, and then he put the taping on Hexagon, which is a group that he formed, which contains all these best-selling authors and speakers and whatnot. And the group has grown to about 160 names now. So it's quite powerful. And he put that on there. So, he also said that this is something that he's sharing with a wider group as well, because the more people that hear this sort of thing with, that miracle cures are possible, the more the belief system kicks in, the more placebo kicks in, and the more people will actually be able to cure themselves of things that maybe medical science says is incurable. Because what I had was labeled as incurable, and I was going on the Reddit sites, the quorum sites, and all of that, and it was doggone depressing to just not see one happy turnout. Basically, with what I had, you have 3 different levels of it. The first level is not good. The first level is you cannot have a social life because you're so exhausted all the time. You might be able to work 2 or 3 hours a week, but you really can't hold a job. That's level 1. And level 2 is you're bedridden. And level 3 is you're hospitalized. So I was looking at this going, okay, I can see why people end their lives when they have this sort of thing, because it's just kind of a game over. And at that time in my life, when I was going through this ordeal, my head was not on straight. So I had to see a doctor, and I never see doctors. I'm proud of saying, I didn't have one sick day in 17 years. I mean, it's hard for people to wrap their head around that because people get sick routinely. Yeah. And I didn't have one, not one. I mean, bless higher source and everything. A lot of it's with my biohacking and little tricks I know, so I can reverse any kind of common cold or even a flu before it gets going. And that's how I have the 17-year track record. But with this was something out of left field. My friend Pavel, who is known, when I met him, he had read my first book, How We Made 18,000% in the Stock Market. And I published that in 2010. And he got a hold of me on Facebook and he said, "Oh my God, this book has been transformational for my trading. Thank you so much." And as we got to know each other, I realized this guy is next level biohacker. I wouldn't even use the label on him. He studied herbal tomes from the 15th and 16th century. He's got his own laboratory, in his basement. And he actually was known at the time as the boy who can cure all diseases. That was his kind of tagline when he met me. So because I was biohacking and have a lot of knowledge at that point, that was our common point of talking about this and realizing that the way he sees cures is completely opposite of the way big pharma sees cures. So he figured out all these ways using herbs, using all kinds of like natural ingredients to alleviate or absolutely cure a lot of conditions, like a lot of the autoimmune conditions. We're seeing so much of the planet being affected by autoimmune disorders today. I think there's over 100 of these things, and there's countries like Bangladesh. I remember meeting someone at one of these health symposiums who said that these autoimmune things are out of control in his country. He believes that it's at least 1/3, if not more, that are affected because people are just tired. They just can't function normally, and it's just like so many people. It's like a standard of a way of life in this country. And I thought, yeah, that's a good point. This whole bit about 10% have autoimmune or 8% have autoimmune. Those figures don't sound right. And when I started writing my book in 2023, I kept adjusting upward those figures. They crept from 8 to 10 to 15, then to 20%. And friends would like read that section and say, your numbers are way off. And then they would send me links to justify why those numbers are off. And so it's gotten to the point where now, you have some pretty hard statistics out of the UK, for instance, on the number of people who have these conditions. And of course, I think since COVID, since 2020, the number of conditions has soared just for a couple reasons. One, mainly, we have so much more stress than we've ever had. And that's due to a confluence of so many factors, from social media to inflation to how most people can't afford to invest in assets. So they can't enjoy, the rising stock market or rising real estate. Millennials, Gen Zs, they're really having a hard time of it. In the U.S., for instance, there's a statistic that said 1 out of 8 families are millionaires now. And that's because 1 out of 8 families bought homes, 10, 20, 30 years ago. And a lot of those homes they might have bought for 100 grand are now worth over a million because of inflation. So
Okay.
those families are doing well, but often they're cash poor.
Mhm.
They're asset rich, or maybe they still have a mortgage, but doesn't mean that they can go and spend lavishly. Now, what about say the bottom 80%? Well, that's where all the social unrest comes in. That's where you see the homelessness, the drug use. It's pretty much a travesty in the Western countries. This is West by West, I mean US, UK, and the EU. I think the US has it the worst of it, although the UK generally walks lock in step with the US. And I
Mhm.
have noticed that just the amount, and Canada, let's include Canada in there, those three countries, there's so much more crime. There's so much more, what do you call it? When you get all these fake phone calls or fake emails and they're trying to
Yeah.
entice you into things. It's just all the scams going on. It's suffocating. Like when I was in LA, I was shocked to see my dad's phone going off, ringing 2 or 3 times an hour that are just all like scam calls or sales calls. And
Yeah.
I told a friend who lives there about my dad's situation. He goes, my dad's lucky. He gets more than 2 or 3 of an hour. And I said, how do you even function if your phone's ringing off the hook all the time? I mean, that's insane. And he's like, oh, it's a way of life here. So I do know
Yeah.
that when I had my UK number, I got rid of it because it just kept getting all these like threatening calls, like, nonsense calls, or it's like, oh, this is the police, or you've evaded taxes, or you haven't paid your gym bill, to a gym I never was even a member of. It's just
Yeah.
really ridiculous calls. So, that's the state of the world we're in where, I've heard various statistics that I've cited in my book. And by the way, my book is a living book in that it never ends. It's constantly updating itself when I get new information. So, in other words, like with autoimmune diseases, it started with a small percentage and it just crept higher and higher over the last 5 years because, stress is a big contributor to that. But also Pavel, my friend, the boy who can cure all diseases, who's now actually, well, that's 2010. So now he would be 31 years old. And he said that he operates on a very underground level because they've tried to kill him because he's a huge force against big pharma, given his ability to cure people. So he told me when I came to him in 2023 with my health situation, he said that so many more people have come to him directly since the vaccines started to roll out, the COVID vaccines, and he believes that the common denominator with all these autoimmune diseases is the COVID vax, because they all have been vaccinated. And I was thinking to myself, it's interesting. I've never had a health consequence in my life. And why now? Why did I get this in 2023? Now, I traced it to stress because I was going through certain things that were one-offs that were quite debilitating, and so it was chronic stress. However, the first two situations called the awakenings I had in my life were more stressful than what I had to deal with in 2023, and I didn't get sick. I was completely healthy during those two ordeals. So I thought what he said made sense. He said, look, the vaccine lowers your resistance, it lowers your immune function, it creates problems so that your system is not going to be as robust in staving off, things like autoimmune disease. And I thought that makes perfect sense. So yeah, he actually gave me his herbal remedies, which basically in my book I mention all of his remedies in
Mhm.
chapter 7, and I've shared those with a lot of people who've asked. And what is great, it's always music to my ears when someone, like, there was this one friend of a friend here in Estonia who has just been riddled with low energy and sicknesses since, well, basically for the last 15 years of her life. And she's only in her 30s. So it's really been taxing and really compromised the quality of her life. And I went to Pavel and I said, here, this is all the things she's dealing with. And Pavel's one of these, he responds immediately, and he's a walking encyclopedia. So he always responds exactly what you need to do. He doesn't need to go research or look it up or anything. And he'll send me the links to the vendors where you get the ingredients. So he said, oh, actually, this is a really simple situation. You're going to be surprised. This person only had to do one thing 3 times a day and out to 6 months. That's usually his guidance is you do something 3 times a day for 6 months. And in this case, it was one thing she had to take, but she had to take it from the right vendor. So he sends the link to that. He generally doesn't get things off Amazon because he said the ingredients are often unreliable or too weak to work.
Mhm.
So you get what you pay for, as a saying goes. I told her, okay, well, Pavel said this is all you need to do, so, but take it from this vendor. So I then, a couple months went by, not 6 months. I saw her at another one, a tea ceremony, and she was so like different. She was like a new person. And she said, I can't believe it. I can't believe that's all I needed to do to get rid of all these horrible things that have been plaguing me for the last 15 years. I said, yeah, that's amazing, isn't it? So those kinds of success stories, make it all worthwhile. Yeah, like I said, I put them in my book. Unfortunately, people who now come to me with new issues, new health issues, Pavel has, I hope, has just gone underground, deep underground, because he is not reachable anymore. Hopefully they didn't, end his life. They tried in 2017, and then they also tried basically the last year we were in communication, which was last year. I haven't had any communication with him this year. So my guess is he's too clever and crafty to be able to get taken down by dark forces. So I assume he will surface again at some point. Yeah. Anyway, his work is really good, and we need more people like him in the world. And I'm sure and plenty of people in El Salvador were very privy to those who go up against big pharma often don't last. And there was an individual that I was introduced to from what I would call an ideal audience member. When I gave my first talk, this ideal audience member came up to me at Chris's after party. It was like a speakers and yeah, basically a speakers party. And there were audience members, and he came up to me, introduced himself, and he had these great questions for me about my talk. So we all of a sudden were totally fully engaged for the next 3 hours, and we found a quiet room because there was live music at this party. We found a quiet room and basically disappeared. And at the end, he said, "You need to meet my friend." And I guess they're working together as well, who is really next level. He's like Pavel, except he's not he's not using herbs and things like that. He's doing more hardware kind of discovery. And this person, David Dennis is his name. So David, interestingly, had already gotten a hold of me before the conference. He knew about me, and he was thinking, maybe we should think about collaboration. So in meeting Dennis and hearing all about all his fantastic technologies, I thought this is fantastic. This is totally game changing for the world. And one thing that I remember that was kind of it was disturbing, but also just the way things are in the world we live. I was telling him about my book and how I am memorializing the names of people who are heroes but were deemed villains by the mainstream press, whether it was my friend Laura, who was a pioneer in stem cell technology starting the year 2000, before the world even knew what a stem cell was, or you get people like Pavel, who they've tried to end him. You've got the commercial grade Dr. George Eby. He's one of the reasons I didn't have any not one sick day in 17 years, because I use his cold cure, which is zinc acetate, and zinc acetate completely ionizes, so it's the strongest form of zinc you could take when a cold is coming on. The moment I would feel a sore throat coming on without any other symptoms, I would immediately zap it with his cold cure, these lozenges. And I would do one every couple hours for the next 6 hours, and the cold was gone. I mean, there was no cold. I didn't give it a fighting chance to even show the first symptom, except for a
And
very,
you were
very
saying that this is something that's really hard to find now, like easy in the past, but super effective. And now you're having trouble even sourcing this.
well, yeah. What happened then I ran out because after years and years of using this product, I was out. So I went back to the internet and found that I couldn't find it anywhere. Not only that, I found horrible smudge smear pieces on Dr. George Eby, and I did some deeper digging, and I actually got a hold of his email. So I wrote to him and I said, I can't find this. I see what the mainstream's done to you. Do you happen to have any that I can buy from you directly, or know where I could get any? And he actually responded, and he said, I don't live in the US anymore. I will never live in that hell-forsaken country. They completely trashed me and my livelihood, and I'm retired and never. I plan to live the rest of my life in peace. So I'm completely out of that. And I wrote him back and I said, look, if you ever want to like revisit the case, I'll be your star witness, because your product has kept me healthy without one sick day in so many years. And it's a sad story that people like him, who are absolute heroes, are just trashed by mainstream press, because common cold industry is a multi-billion-dollar industry. what he single-handedly does is make it so that I don't have to spend any money seeing a doctor or buying any kind of over-the-counter medication or anything. Just buy his stuff. And I mean, I travel with it. I travel with zinc acetate wherever I go. Just in the rare event I'm going to get the start of that sore throat. Then, that might happen once or twice a year where you just, get that tickle. And then I know immediately, all right, I got my zinc acetate. I'm going to zap it. Actually, I did that in El Salvador. I had my zinc there, and because I wasn't getting enough sleep because of the jet lag and change of time and all of this, and also all these things that were dive bombing around me, and the markets it was a very, very unsettling situation. But nevertheless, I think my resistance was really, really low, because when you go string of nights without sleeping properly, sleeping 2 or 3 hours a night, that is horrible. Anyway, yeah, I started getting that sore throat, so I zapped it with zinc. Boom, done. Didn't have to deal with it, because that would have been real tragic if, like, on top of everything else, I'm now getting a fever or whatever. So
Yeah.
yeah, I'm just disciplined to always take the zinc with me to keep this track record going. And if it weren't for COVID, I'd actually now the record would be, I got COVID in 2021. Yeah, scratch that out, and also scratch out the 2023, which was a one-off with this autoimmune condition. Yeah, other than that, I'm used to feeling 100% all the time. And of course, biohacking is a great tool to keep one in, fighting trim. That, I'm used to not feeling like lack of energy. A friend who's known me for since 2020, she asked me, she says, "Do you ever get tired?" And I was like, "Well, of course, we get tired at
I
bedtime
asked
or
you
whatever,
that
but I know
too.
what you
Like,
mean."
looking at the list, I'm like, do you sleep? You're just composing music in the middle of the night and then day trading and then inventing new periodic elements. Do you go to bed at any time? You're like, "No, I'm never tired."
Yeah, I mean, I did sleep experiments on myself when I was a student, because I wanted to see if I could just be able to skip every other night. Wouldn't that be great? Because you get like an extra 7, 8 hours to yourself every other night. And the experiment was a miserable failure after about a week of it. The body definitely needs sleep. I think it's
Yeah.
the hardest thing to, I don't think you can really biohack it unless you have a CRISPR device where you reprogram your genes and be one of those lucky 3% of the population who really only needs 3 or 4%, 3 or 4 hours of sleep, because their sleep is that efficient. And I had a roommate in
Mhm.
college at Berkeley. He was a triple major in material science engineering, computer science, and physics. Um, heavy, heavy stuff. And he was one of those lucky 3%. After generally 3 or 4 hours, he would be up again, and he'd just be working like a racehorse and getting straight A's. And so it was not fun being his friend in that regard, because it was really hard to beat someone like that at
Yeah.
academics.
You almost have like an evolution of solutions. Like, I'm sure you were always all of these things, always spiritual, always health conscious, always interested in finance. But like in the beginning, you were really well known for making millionaires out of people. So there's like a financial solution. And then you started getting more and more well known for the biohacking stuff. And now you're going to these more spiritual solutions. Is there one avenue where, like, you say that you get censored often? This book that you've just written, you can't get out there. Where do you think they hit you more? Is it the financial sector? Is it your viewpoints on health? Is there one avenue where they attack you more, or is it just all of it?
Well, yeah, it started a long time ago when I got a wake up call to how treacherous life can be. But I don't like to use negative words, because really everything is a challenge and an opportunity for growth. So I don't, treacherous has a negative connotation. Really, they're challenges. And when I was featured in Kevin Marder's book, Conversations with Top Traders, he put me in chapter one because I had the highest track record that was audited at the time. He basically went around the United States and interviewed traders that he believed had top track records, and he put them all in his book. So I became a big, well, in the investment world, I became a celebrity as the guy who has a top track record in the United States. And it was an amazing time in my life. However, I remember William O'Neill, who started Investors Business Daily, and he's the guy with the top track record going back to 1958, which is why when I was a PhD, a candidate in physics at Berkeley, I wanted to quit halfway through and just go work for him or work for Wall Street, or just get my foot in
Yeah.
the door, because I realized while I'm good at nuclear physics, I don't love it. What I love is the art and science of investments in stocks. Working for him was beyond a dream job, because I had to finish my PhD. That was a difference. I did finish the degree, and I'm glad I did, because then we ended up putting two elements on the periodic table, which was newsworthy and really put me in a rarefied class of people so that I could knock on Wall Street stores without a Harvard MBA and get them to answer. And with O'Neill, I remember they had me in for 3 interviews, and they finally granted me an interview with him. That usually doesn't happen. He told me to my face, he said, "Look, you have a very unusual track, like, resume. I'm not sure where to place you because you're not traditional whatsoever, but I'm a maverick, and that's why I'm not in Wall Street. That's why I'm out here, on the West Coast. And we're gonna start you at the bottom, but I think if you have what it takes, you're gonna find your way to higher ground really fast." And he was true to his word. 3 months later, I had my first promotion, and then a year after that, I was invited into what they call the inner circle at the company, which is to help trade William O'Neill's wealth, which was quite substantial by that point. It hadn't hit $1 billion yet, but it was certainly in the low 9 figures. And so that was an amazing journey for me to have that to be invited to do that. And of course, I already had a number of years of top performance in the market, because I was trading while I was a student at Berkeley, and I was building my track record, building my trading strategies, and all of that. And also William O'Neill's book, How to Make Money in Stocks, that was published in 1989. That was a book that turned around my investment strategies to the point where I started to be consistently profitable. So there's many reasons I wanted to work for him. But yeah, I mean, when I was in grad school, Glenn Seaborg was my thesis advisor. He is the statesman and Nobel laureate who created plutonium and 9 other elements on the table. And he was also an advisor to 10 presidents. So in his later years, he had a talk called 10 Elements and 10 Presidents. But he was the top gun. And I remember when I was at Princeton University, I was interviewing a nuclear physics professor there for their PhD program. And I remember that this professor said to me that he would be honored to have me in his group. However, he would be remiss if he didn't strongly urge me to stay at Berkeley, because I have a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to work with one of the greats in science, Glenn Seaborg. And yeah, I mean, that actually turned my thinking around, because I had my heart set on Princeton. I didn't want to stay at the same university again. I'd already done my undergrad at Berkeley, so I wanted to change the venue. But this physics professor at Princeton, bless his soul, I mean, he turned my thinking around. So I stayed at Berkeley, and that was definitely the best thing I could have done, because we did what we did, newsworthy events, and then that opened the door to securing a position at O'Neill. And from O'Neill, trading with him and developing this track record, which was audited. And Kevin Martyr, who is actually one of the co-founders of MarketWatch.com, he put me in chapter 1 because he said that my track record is towers compared to anyone else's that he's audited. And actually, in his book, I'm clocked at over 72,000% over a period of basically 5 years. Now that number is the true number. The Wiley number, because I published a book with a business partner, Gil Morales, in 2010 for Wiley and Sons. They came to us and said, you were the top performers at O'Neill. Will you write a book about, what you learned there and your new trading strategies and all these? We published our first book for Wiley and Sons in 2010 called How We Made 18,000% in the Stock Market. That 18,000% comes from a KPMG audit that was done on the same account. The accounting rules do not allow a Big Four auditor like KPMG to take into account the fact that I did not use half of the trading account for generally the first half of each year. Imagine, like, if let's say you're given $1 million to trade, but you're only allowed to trade 100,000 of it. If you double that 100,000, you did 100%. You didn't do 10%. Yeah, you added 100,000 on the million. KPMG would say you only did 10% because that's accounting rule standards. Their hands are tied, basically. So that's 18,000%. I always bristle a little bit because I'm like, that's the lie. That is a complete lie. It's over 72,000%. Yeah. Anyway, it's just numbers, but yeah, I'm very, very happy that I've been able to do exactly what I love to do. Switching out of nuclear physics into something that I absolutely have nothing but passion for was exactly the right career move to do. But then as the years roll on, of course, I've been much more interested in how do we change the world for the better. And in meeting certain people in my travels, there's a saying, there's no coincidences. You attract your frequency. So I've been meeting the right people at the right times. Yeah, it's so beautifully coincidental. Yeah, I mean, the fact that I've also met a lot of people who've been ended, and this David Dennis and I, when we were trading stories, I told him about these people I've memorialized. He had a folder on his phone of, I don't know, it was at least 60 people. And he said, they've all been ended. They were all friends of his. I was like, yeah,
For what reasons?
they
And
were
find
all, they were all involved in technologies that would compromise big business or big pharma, big government, big fill in the blank.
Mhm.
I had a friend who, wow. Gareth Giles is someone I met in London back in 2013 when Vitalik Buterin would throw these they were open to the public, but there were only a trickle of us. Maybe there were like a dozen of us. And he was talking about Ethereum, and it hadn't been launched yet. And I would go to these little meetings, and I remember I'd become quite spiritual by this point in my life. And so I remember walking in one of his later meetings where now it was a bigger room. And I asked higher source, I said, okay, there's a few people here right now. Where should I sit in this room that holds about 30 people? So it led me to sit in an empty chair, not next to anyone in particular. Thought, okay, I'm sitting in this empty chair. And the next thing I know, this guy comes up to, is that seat taken? I said, no. And that guy's name was Gareth Giles. He was really into Dogecoin at the time, really like also next level thinker. And as we got to know each other, I realized that he is massively disruptive to big philanthropy. And philanthropy, as nice as that word sounds, is horribly
Yeah.
corrupt. Some of the biggest societies we know of,
Yeah.
that are
Canada knows
worth
that to
billions of
be true.
dollars.
Yeah. Our own prime minister had been caught in many charity scandals, like the We Charity scandal. It's a grift.
Yeah, and so he taught me that with Dogecoin blockchain, you can actually see that 97% or more of the funds make it to the victims. You can see it cleanly on the blockchain. And I remember back then, because this is now 2013, there were so many different issues that were being resolved where the victims would get the money. It could be something simple as, oh, this student doesn't needs a scholarship or needs tuition, whatever, but it could be hurricane victims, whatever it is, and it was so efficient and clean at doing that. And so thing of it was that we today don't remember these things, even though they're on the blockchain. And Gareth was the guy who was in charge of all of this. And we were both in London at the time. And this was in now, fast forward a year. So we're in 2014. And there's weird stuff going on. I won't go into details, but we just noticed there's cracks in what's going on in terms of the matrix, and like, do we want to take the red pill or the blue pill? And we're seeing the red pill, and we're seeing things that are pretty disturbing. And we both left the country in 2015, and I remember having a conversation with him middle of 2015 where he revealed, he's like, oh, I don't live in that country anymore. And I said, yeah, I don't either. And then he said something to the effect of, I'm in a bunker surrounded by shielding right now. And I joked, I said, oh, it must be nice to be able to talk freely. Because I knew he was a bit encumbered with, when we were in London, he would be like very paranoid and always watching over his back because of the thing, being involved in what he was involved in. When you try to tackle the bigs, whether it's big pharma, big philanthropy, whatever, you can be asking for a lot of trouble. And so I wasn't surprised to hear he had left the UK. And of course, he was in undisclosed location. And when I joked that he could speak freely, he was like, serious. You're like, are you kidding? They could have a new CIA technology pointed at me and, recording everything I'm saying. Then we talked about AI, and he said, oh, he's not involved in Dogecoin anymore. He's handed it off to someone else. The whole philanthropic nature of it. He's gotten fully into AI, and he said he's really pessimistic about the future of humanity because he believes that AI will exterminate us. We will have the Terminator effect. And of course, I took the other position. I said, look, we're too decentralized for that to happen. If we're in a closed system, sure, that could happen. But we are, technology is helping us decentralize. And I believe that the outcome is going to be fantastic, although we might have some severe setbacks along the way, sure. And so we agreed to disagree. As he colloquially said, his British pessimism and my American optimism, we'll have to agree to disagree on this one. So it was a really nice call. But he did say one thing. He left me with one thing. He said, look, that the team he's on has already developed an AI that is smarter than Einstein. And he kind of left it there, like kind of hinting they've already figured out AGI. Like this is not like, a static thing. And he said this genie has to stay in the bottle. It was his comment.
Mhm.
So his view was, I'm going to keep it in the bottle. And again, like I've heard in El Salvador when I was with this ideal audience member who introduced himself to me at this after party and had all these great questions for me about my talk. He and I, and there's a couple others, we formed a group that will utilize AI technology to help reform education in El Salvador and other major things. I mean, basically, there's nothing that AI can't have an impact on. So he told me that the group that he has been connected to, he doesn't work with them, but he believes that they have created something that is very, very close to AGI. And they've been working on this since 2015. So it's a good 10 years. And I thought that's pretty huge. And who knows what, this group, I don't know who Gareth was associated with because he did not say. He was very, very, very careful about what he said on the phone to me because like he said, they could be listening even though he's in a bunker. You never know. But I always wonder, I wonder if it was this group because we talked in 2000. He said he'd been recently joining this group, and this group was formed to basically create AGI back then. Anyway, these are just interesting questions I sometimes ponder in terms of like, well, with a lot of technologies, it's very gradual until it's sudden. And I sometimes wonder, did they do what's sudden back then and they just kept it in the bottle the whole time? Because
Yeah.
obviously I don't want to get conspiracy theory and everything. There are people, although on the other hand, there are technologies that have existed for years that the genie is kept in the bottle because
Sure.
if you come out with it, it's going to get taken out. Some major government will take it out. So, it is in the realm of possibility. Yeah, I mean,
Two
I think
things.
we
When
are,
it comes,
closer
I was just
closer to
gonna say
AGI than we've been.
when it comes to threats to government institutions, obviously AGI is a threat. I'm curious also, was your knowledge of the science of trading, the ability to accumulate wealth quickly, is that a threat? Because you were also teaching people that skill. How big of a threat is just that to big government institutions?
I don't think it really is. In my case, though, they wanted to take me apart financially, take my freedom away, take my life away. It feels like, yeah, the first time it was let's get rid of this guy, take him out of circulation.
Why? Why though?
Well, this goes back to my time in the UK, where I was involved, like I said, in very early Ethereum and therefore obviously Bitcoin meetings in 2013. I bought my first Bitcoin in January of that year when it was in the teens, and some of these meetings were, they're pretty intense, where you have a specialist debugging the room meeting and giving you the green light is like, okay, you can all enter. And leave your electronics in the other room because what the stuff we're talking about was Bitcoin related. And keep in mind that the UK still hates Bitcoin. They hated it with a passion back then. And so
Mhm.
just the fact that I was involved in these countries have ears everywhere. If you become a person of interest, and I think I'd been a person of interest for a while, being involved in these technologies certainly doesn't help. And what made me a person of interest, I believe, was back in 2010 when that was the time I decided, okay, I'm going to start sending out a special email to people I've met in my travels that I consider game changers in whatever regard, whatever industry they're in. And this group grew to basically almost 50 people over the years. Elon Musk was one of them. I met him at this St. Bart's party hosted by Lawrence Bender, who's my favorite producer. He produced most of Quentin Tarantino's movies. And Elon at the time wasn't a world sensation. I mean, I knew who he was with SpaceX and everything, but that was the nature of this party. Like Red Hot Chili Peppers were there. Everyone was someone interesting. And when I was introduced to Elon, we ended up going into like kind of like at the party in San Salvador, we went into our own little bubble chamber, just kind of kept talking for like over an hour. He had all these interesting questions about nuclear physics, but we were talking about everything, not just science, all kinds of stuff. So I remember, I really wish I had a recording of the conversation because it was like one of those beautiful conversations that just kind of have a natural flow to them. And then at the end, we traded emails, and he said, "Look, when you're in LA next time, I'll give you a personal tour of SpaceX." And the thing is that I had and did not go back to LA for a number of years. And we kept in loose touch on email because I invited him to, there was an estate party that I invited him to that we were throwing. But of course, he was busy launching rockets, so he was unable to attend. After that point, there was no reason I needed to contact him. A few years went by, and then, lost touch. Yeah, I think that the powers that be, well, a hacker friend of mine told me in, I think it was 2013. Yes. So it was about 3 years after I had been doing this that he said I should stop sending these emails out to these people. And the nature of the emails was basically how certain governments are crippling personal rights, and specifically how they're doing it. So it was all factual with links. It wasn't theory at all. And I just wanted these game changers to be aware, like, hey, this is what's going on in these countries, and this is not good. This is a really bad trend because our rights are being decimated. And this hacker friend said, you better stop because the NSA is looking at all your emails. Yeah,
Mm.
they're private, but nothing's private, and I immediately stopped cold. And so I just never sent anything more out again to this group. But I think it was too late by then because, US and UK are pretty connected. And at that point, when I'm a person of interest, there was something that happened that I still don't have all the facts to. But basically in late 2014, I went to Cape Town, like I often do. And I get a call on the first of the year from my favorite chef on the planet, who he was one of two people I entrusted with a key to my place. Now, I'd known this I'd known this person for many, many years, and he has always been nothing but forthright in everything he does. But some brain worm got into his head while I was gone, and he uses my place to throw a party without asking me. Okay, I would have not had a problem with that, but I don't understand why he felt the need to go behind my back. But he invites someone that I was told is like jailbait. And I was like, okay, I don't really know this person. This person's friends of friends, and everyone's in a group situation. And I was told, yeah, you should stay away from that person. I was advised. I'm like, well, I don't really know her, so yeah, no problem. Or like, whatever, but thanks for the advice, because this person is sleeping around with a lot of people, and that's really not good because all those people could go to jail because I learned that her ID is fake and she's not 16, she's 15. So I was like, that's really, really bad. And this, by the way, is 2014. But by then we'd all already seen like, okay, there's some bad things going on here. So what does this favorite chef of friend of mine do? He invites that girl as one of the guests. I mean, like, what? I was beside myself. I was like, how does this even happen? This couldn't have been scripted worse,
Mhm.
and he's really feeling horrible because he said, well, by coincidence, while I was throwing the party, the police raided your place. Why would the police raid my place?
Yeah.
I'm just now completely like, okay, so they got my electronics. Well, who cares? Whatever.
Yeah.
They can have my electronics because they're old electronics. But then I realized, I called a friend who is really, really, he knows how this stuff works. Because he's been under the gun. He presides over game changing technologies himself, so he's no stranger to how these states can operate. And he looked
How
into
these
it,
things
and
get set up. Yeah, and you're not even, just to be clear, you're not even there. So you're just getting in trouble like guilty by association.
right, they were really pushing, really stretching it as far as they could because I don't know where these orders are coming from. Maybe the
Mhm.
U.S. Who knows? But they were under the. It was like an operation to like, okay, there was that show Get Smart. Was it Get Chris? And I don't understand like why they would put the effort in like that. Except maybe they got the sense from my social media that okay, I meet really important people and these people are influential. Plus, I'm really good at trading small into big because I've been financially raped more than once, and I've had to trade small back into big. So that's a very, very valuable weapon right there. And I teach people how to trade and hopefully become millionaires themselves. I don't think that's really the issue. I think the issue is what has been hey, let's cut this guy off at the kneecaps by let's erase his freedom. Let's just take him out of circulation because he's, as someone said, an impediment. That's what I was labeled by a very famous family. Um, and in other words, I'm a flea on the back. I'm not any serious threat, but the way the world works is, yeah, let's get rid of the fleas, pick them off. But yeah, that said, it was quite a shock that this favorite chef did what he did. I almost feel like higher source got into his head to create the situation so it could unfold the way it did, which was nothing short of traumatic, because my let's call this other friend Mark, who is very, very science oriented and has been under the gun before and presides over major technologies. And he looked into it and he said, get out of there, get out of the country. You don't want to be in the country. You're being set up. And his intelligence runs far and wide. So I took his advice, and it was good advice because I let someone stay at my place after I left, and then the police made a second attempt to raid my place. Of course, there's nothing there. There's no electronics because they've already taken the electronics. But what I learned was, because I wasn't there on the premises when they did the raid, those electronics are not admissible in court. So they can't use them. They can't even tamper with them or anything. They're useless, basically. So they were trying a second go to get at my electronics.
What do you think they were hoping to find?
No, nothing. I mean, the way it works, as Silicon Valley, certain Silicon Valley executives have said, when you go through border control or when you're traveling, sometimes you should not take any electronics with you, because if they get a hold of those electronics, they will tamper with them. And I always thought, God, that sounds ridiculous. That sounds really crazy. It's so against every constitution, But when I was going into, basically what happened was, the situation in the UK died down. I had to cut short my trip to in Cape Town to go back and do an interview with the authorities, at which point I realized very quickly, oh, they are definitely trying to pigeonhole me into a certain thing, which is just totally jailable, even though I wasn't even there in the country. It was like, wow, this is a ridiculously weak case that they have, and they're pulling at all the threads to see if they can get anything to stick.
They were
But
really
that was
trying to
very worrisome.
leverage this jailbait, as you call her, and almost like a Jeffrey Epstein scenario, even though you weren't physically there.
Right, right. And
Mm.
and also someone that I wasn't friends with. She was someone you see in the scene with like a lot of other people. Like I said, she was sleeping around, so she was sleeping around with people I knew. And interestingly, those people did not get into, well, some of them did get into trouble because that was like collateral damage, I call it. But yeah, it's all, I talk about all this in detail in my book, and it was a real eye opener to see how the justice system works in different countries like this one, and also how the spin by using mainstream press around, basically the chef became the focal point, and they spun this most ludicrous story about him and this girl and what he's doing, basically because he had to take the fall because I wasn't in the country, and someone had to take the fall. So he took the fall big time, and so did a number of other people. And it was the biggest travesty of justice to see this. And also, there's all front page cases too. So his reputation was completely destroyed. And then what happened, like that was very, very strange. Just the fact that he did what he did and it unfolded the way it did. Again, all these are one in a million
Mhm.
events that are stacking to create this horrible situation. And then if we go to 2017, November, enough time has gone by now. I have not been in the UK since January 2015. Everything's kind of blown over, whatever. Okay. Like, the case was sorted and settled, wrapped up, concluded, against the people who had allegedly slept with this girl. And so in November, I was invited by a very good friend of mine that I've known since my days in Geneva, Switzerland. And he's a Top Gun guy. He's good friends with the mayor of Geneva and CEOs of major banks in Switzerland and otherwise. So he knows my take. He was by the way, one of the 49 that I would send emails to, updating them about, hey, the world's going rogue, governments are going rogue, our rights are being stripped away, blah, blah, blah. He's completely in support of all this stuff. And he said that he's throwing something called Geneva Wealth Tech Convention on November 17th of 2017, or some give or take a day, something like that. And he wants me to not only give the keynote, the keynote, not like everyone gives keynote. I'm the guy giving the keynote and leading the evening processions. So I said, I'm honored. I cannot wait. This is going to be fantastic. So I remember going to the computer after I was biking for an hour, come back to the computer, I need to set up my ticket. There's tons of direct flights from LAX to Geneva, Switzerland. Well, this
Mhm.
is the one time there's not any direct flights. Not only that, all the stopovers had disappeared except for one. You have to fly into London's Heathrow Airport on route to Geneva. I'm like, this is crazy. This is impossible. This is ridiculous. Again, I think it's higher source at work here. So I was forced to take that flight. We touched down in Heathrow. The bell goes off. People start getting out of their seats to get their luggage. And then the stewardess comes on with a shocked voice. Sit down, please sit down, please sit down, please sit down. I mean, I've never heard a stewardess sound like this. And the next thing I know, all these police are boarding the plane, coming up to me and basically arresting me on the spot.
For
And
what? For what though?
well, I found out, well, that's the thing. I don't know what they were arresting me for. So they take me to the station and I'm telling them, I need to be able to make my flight because I am giving a very important talk in Geneva tomorrow, blah, blah, blah. And I remember one of the officers let slip, you're not going to be giving that talk. Now, the talk I was going to give, and I'm sure that they see all of this stuff because I mean, I'm sharing it with my friend Jay in Geneva, who's hosting the whole event. The name of the talk was pretty controversial. It was how Bitcoin would destroy all governments. And he loved the controversy and he understood how this could become true in time. It's not going to be an overnight thing, but it certainly will take power away from centralized forms of corruption
Mhm.
because Bitcoin is decentralized and they can't really do anything about it. Uh, so you know, I'm amused that okay, I couldn't give my talk because this happened. I remember I saw the same detective that interviewed me in January of 2015 when I had to cut my trip in South Africa short. And he's interviewing me, and he's got hundreds of questions that I'm just saying no reply to. That's how I would advise, because then they can't use anything. And I was just thinking, gosh, if I answered every single one of his questions, we'd be here till Tuesday. And it's the same detective. And I remember he got my phone in his hand and he's basically like, I know we're going to find something on this. And basically at that point, I knew, okay, I wonder if these Silicon Valley guys who say, they tamper with your stuff, I wonder if that's about to happen to me. Because he had just this look on his face of certainty. Like,
Mhm.
when we have you because we're going to do what we do. So you can't get out of this one. It was like, you don't have that level of absolute certainty unless you're going to tamper with someone's equipment.
That's right. And it was different back then. Like right now, we have the UK arresting people for mean tweets. Like it sounds like it's pretty easy to get arrested now. Back then, they weren't as crazy.
Yeah, it's gotten just worse and worse over time. And yeah, you can look at AI and AI. Like the last thing I looked at AI was they're still making 33 arrests a day just for X posts. And this was back in April before I flew in there because I wanted to make sure, okay, my book is not going to get me arrested, is it? And it did say that there's no record of arrests made from Substack posts since my book's on Substack. So yeah, and sure enough, everything went really, really smoothly. But the the thing about the situation in the UK was that something that my friend Mark, who's connected with intelligence, he said to me when everything had, well, what happened was, okay, so I had three different forensics groups and I had to prove my innocence. And sure enough, they found that I had not only not, I had not there were illegal files that they claimed because the thing was that like they really couldn't get me for much of anything. I hadn't done anything wrong. So the only thing they
Mhm.
could get me for was whatever they put on my devices. And the forensics team said that these had been planted there. I had not even looked at any of the files, which they could see through their forensics analysis. And so that you would think would close the case on the spot. But what happened, the reason it didn't close was there was some kind of, we don't know where this is coming from, but some kind of mandate to have me ended one way or another. When I was taken into the prison system, they put me in the worst prison with the highest homicide rates, and there were 3 attempts on my life. And one of the OGs, like prisoners there, like this older guy, he kind of befriended me and he's like, who did you upset at the top? He knew something wrong, something was going on that was seriously against me. I wasn't given calling credits. I wasn't given a chance to even call my bank to raise the bail money. Nothing. I couldn't do anything, and it was pretty surreal to actually experience this. And when I finally raised the bail money and all of that to get out to await trial. There were things when your frequency, I also wanted to say for the listeners, when my frequency has gone to zero, it invites so many negative synchronicities or what you'd call extremely bad luck on a daily basis. And that sometimes is even worse than, what you're facing. This was going on for like 7 months of this because this is from November all the way to June of 2018. And it was absolutely brutal to be in that state. It's basically the law of attraction, attracting the worst things possible. And to where I would walk outside and look both ways to make sure a motorcycle isn't like careening wildly in my direction, about to run me over. It was that level of bad things happening on a routine basis. And so when I showcased my innocence, they didn't close the case. There's someone, and I won't mention who, but there was someone I believe had serious grievances on me. It was because I wouldn't get the marriage annulled. My marriage wouldn't get annulled. So basically, this person said I would be ended if I didn't do that. So it seemed like that person would be the only person who would have that kind of power as well to, basically dictate to a government what she needed to have done. And so and I can't think of anyone else who would have that kind of power and authority. And I talk again, these are all detailed in my book, all the little details. But when it looked like the end for me at this point in my life, because through a series again of 1 in a million events where my parents were in a meeting with the lawyers and I couldn't attend it because of that little tag they put on your ankle. But on top of it, my phone for the first time would not properly dial in. And then when it finally did dial in, I couldn't hear them. It's like it was just a comedy of errors. So I don't know what was said at that pivotal meeting. But when my parents got back, they looked really dejected and they said, "Oh, they think you're going to be in prison for life." And I'm thinking, how is that even possible? Wait, what? Like, this is insanity. But that, of course, at that time in my life, that was my worst fear. Exactly that I would be incarcerated for life because then I'm no good to anybody. And so when my parents went out for dinner that evening and I'm back at my Airbnb, I had taken the 13th story in a building with the intention that if this happened, I would jump. And when the moment of truth came and I swung my leg over the ledge, the balcony, I never did it in a sense that I was going to jump, not even for a second. I just wanted to see what it felt like. And that was the breaking point. Something inside me just laughed uproariously. And I looked at the sky and I said, this is the most unjust thing in the world. I'm going to stick around because I'm dying to know how this turns out. And at that point, this shift in me, it was like a frequency, like it's like the weight was lifted. I basically did a full bore surrender to higher source, as in I'm okay with whatever happens. I'm actually okay. I want to just see how this turns out. And that was the beginning of the end of the prosecution's case against me, because then in rapid fashion, my dad came home. I mean, my parents came home. My dad had this great idea that we put into execution on Monday because it was on Friday, and that was a great idea. And then actually on Tuesday, the whole case was withdrawn completely without any reason. No freaking reason why they're now just completely withdrawing the case.
So Rob, you're going to go to prison for life to actually don't worry about it. Everything's fine. The case is going away. What?
Yeah, it was absolutely bizarre. My legal team and they're very seasoned because it costs an arm and a leg, and they've seen, they had never seen anything like this. They didn't even understand why, and they even, they needed to make sure that this is real, and yeah, it was absolutely bizarre. And by the way, from the time that my electronics were found to have been, files were planted on there, not by me, and I had never even looked at the files. There were many weeks that went by between that point and the time that they closed the case. So they didn't close the case because of the files, which you would think they would have, but they were under some kind of order. We don't know where this was coming from. But my friend Mark then told me in Switzerland, after, I had gotten my password back, bail money back, everything was now sorted. And by the way, the case never even existed, it seems. Like, it's like just been erased. It's like, I guess, they can create something and they can erase it as well if they want. But he told me that there was a meeting, a high-level meeting between the UK and the Chinese government, the two governments. And I had nothing to do with that, of course. But there was someone at the meeting who said that if I'm not given my freedom, the deal will not go through. And I'm just thinking, who is this person and why would they even care? Like, I just don't I don't get it. And my friend Mark could never find any information or color on who this person might be. The only person I could think of everyone I know who has that kind of authority and power is Elon Musk. That would
I
be
was
it.
just gonna say that. I was like, "Did Elon swoop in to save you?"
I have no idea. Stranger things have happened.
Yeah.
He seems to be the only candidate because the other ones that like had certain levels of power and influence, a number of those are not here anymore. It certainly couldn't be them, and to this day it remains a mystery. I'm sure that if it was him, I don't think he would say anyway. Whatever happened, higher source saved the day at the end. Because higher source is
Mhm.
always there in the quantum field, dictating all the things that we do and. As far as my favorite chef, who, I mean, it's tragic what happened to him. But again, I don't like saying anything's tragic. Like it goes back to my whole thing. There's no bad. It's all
Mhm.
growth. That's why we're here. We're in this matrix simulation for upping our game when it comes to our soul personal evolution. That's our whole point in being here, and it's beautiful. So Sadhguru always says, "You're not the body. You're not even the mind." Yeah, we're consciousness, we're awareness. Michael Singer says, sit in that seat of consciousness as life unfolds and just accept everything with grace, no matter what it is. And he certainly, in his book, The Surrender Experiment, which is an amazing book, he talks about
Love
being
that.
falsely accused, 6 years out of his life,
Yeah.
how things went from bad to worse, kind of like in my situation, like one in a million events were stacking up against him to the point where he realized he's facing 35 years, which could definitely be a real thing. He might end up in prison for 35 years for something he didn't do. And I love his narrative in the book because he said the worse things got, the deeper he went spiritually, the more of an opportunity it was to just go deeper and deeper. As in, he's not resisting, he's accepting. He's accepting everything with grace. And it's like, I just get chills whenever I talk about stuff like that because it's so beautiful. This quantum field tapestry that is the real reality to everything, and you know, simulations is kind of a layer on top. And in this
Mhm.
simulation, we like to also simulate things with role playing games and whatever. And so it's a great opportunity, to be here to 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 what I would say whole harmonize oneself. Whole harmonize is a word I recently trademarked because I think it conveys quite perfectly the optimization of mind, body, and soul. And that means right mindset. My wisdom engine is really good at keeping my mindset on track, despite how bad things seem to be getting in some regards. And yeah, I'm grateful for the prior challenges, the freedom challenge, the health challenge. Those are all great blessings in disguise. Because when you're going through them, though, they seem like it gets to the point where it does seem like you're checkmate. It's over.
Mhm.
But that is both of those times, like with the health thing, when I in the health situation, I reached that surrender point on the fifth night of no sleep where I quit clonazepam, which is Clonopin, which is horribly addictive. And no one quits it cold turkey because you get seizures and brain damage and potentially death. And I remember at that point, I would never have put clonazepam in my body. But when I saw a top doctor here, and it doesn't matter if they're top or not, all doctors are programmed to write prescriptions. And I was prescribed this Clonopin that is horribly addictive. I mean, it doesn't take, you get addicted to this stuff in less than 10 days. And so when I quit cold turkey, I couldn't get even a micro sleep because all the GABA in my brain is depleted from this drug. And I'm just thinking, how can this even be legal? I had been taking the drug for a while to the point where I was feeling better because I was actually sleeping better. And then my biohacking self awoke and I looked into what I'm putting in my body and I was horrified to see treatment centers around the world for clonazepam, which is one of the most powerful benzodiazepines. Then I started looking at the Reddit sites and all the people are addicted to this and how no one quits cold turkey and how people are still addicted 3 years later and they're trying to wean themselves off. And Jordan Peterson was one of the victims who said it nearly destroyed his life. So at that point, when I was realizing the horrors of what I'm putting in my body, I resolved I'm never taking this again. And at that point, Vishen Lakhiani, who founded Mind Valley, we happened to run into each other. This has never happened before. We're good friends, but we've never run into each other. Well, at this point, he saw the state I was in. And he had invited me a few weeks prior to like his special like dinners and parties, which I said, I'm not going to be able to go to these because I'm going to be out of town. And the reason I didn't give him was that I think I'm seriously ill and I'm going to need serious medical care, meaning I need to go to LA and see like Cedars-Sinai or something, because this is getting way out of hand. And I've never faced any kind of issue where I'm like down to 2% energy level, where I can barely function. So when he saw the state, he immediately gets on his phone. He calls Caitlin, who's a miracle cure healer who has given lots of talks for Mind Valley. And she works with Joe Dispenza as well. And I'm sure many of your listeners know Joe Dispenza, or if not, Google him, and he's great stuff. So basically got to meet Caitlin a few hours later, and she did like some interesting energy profile on me, aura, whatever. I'm not sure exactly what, but she said, look, you have the ability to cure yourself, and you do not ever need to put this drug back in your body. And I said, yeah, that's my resolve. But I said, I'm already twitching. It's day 3 now, and I can't sleep at all. And my muscles are starting to twitch, just like the recipe said. Basically, in 1 week from now, I'm probably going to have seizures. And then week 2, week 3, that's where the real brain damage starts to occur and potentially death. Because when you don't sleep for, 3 or 4 weeks, most people they're not going to be able to survive that. And I felt, well, come what may, I'm not putting this back in my body. And it was nice to hear her say, you have the ability to overcome this. I think everybody does, but she was like, especially saying, you really can overcome this. Don't ever put clonazepam back in your body again. And so it was on the 5th. Well, it was 5 nights of no sleep. That night, that last night, it was 2:30 in the morning, and I was at that point realizing, okay, I'm probably not going to sleep for another probably 2.5, 3.5 weeks. So that means that if that happens, I guess I'm not going to be around anymore. And at that point, there was such a softness and level of peace that overtook me. And I was like, I'm okay. I'm okay with whatever happens. I really made peace with it. And right at that point, there was something deep inside me. And the best I could say it's like an internal frequency upgrade or shift or something, but it was subtle. It was a very subtle thing, but it was something I'd never felt in my life. And I took notice. And it was, like I said, 2:30 in the morning. And I was like, that's weird. Huh. Didn't happen for very long, but it was something that was very material within like the core of my being. Moments later, not only was I able to get to sleep after not sleeping for 5 nights, 5 days, 5 nights, I slept better than I'd slept in ages. And when I woke up, all the symptoms were gone. And it was to the point where, wait, I feel myself again. Wait, how is that possible? Am I dreaming? Am I being delusional? All these thoughts streamed through my head of, okay, well, this is going to come back. This debilitation is going to come back. And I thought, should I tell anyone? And I was like, I won't tell anyone. Let's wait a day to see what happens. But as I got out of bed, I mean, when you feel like top of the world, that's how I felt. I felt better than 1,000%. I just was like, screw it. I'm telling everyone, this is amazing. My brain's back. My body's back. If this is amazing. And so I called everyone, called Vision, my parents, friends, and everything, and told them the good news. And that's where the next night I got this channel download from above, where I sat up in bed and wrote into my phone for like the next few hours, just all this wisdom, which I then put into my book. It's pretty much verbatim, all this really great stuff. Again, where is it coming from? It's coming from higher source. And then on the night after that, so the third night, I tapped into, without realizing it, what Tesla called it's like a quantum field of infinite intelligence. I've heard that phrase being used, but basically I was able to create new languages, create new jokes. I don't know why I went to jokes, but I was making myself laugh. So I was making myself laugh and giggle out loud for hours. And by the way, I'm totally sober, of course, but I never had anything happen like that to me in my life, where I am formulating the funniest, richest, freshest, wittiest pieces of humor and gluing things together from this new language I created and making funny word sounds. It was effortless. Like I could just pick from the sea of infinite creativity at will. Then at the end of it, I mean, because this went on for hours, I did remember as much as I could and put it into my phone, because I was like, all right, I want to have some record of all these cool things that I've created with my mind.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I mean, sure enough, to this day, they stand as, oh, well, this is really original, beautiful, this is really clever, funny stuff, and to be able to tap back into that field, because my ability to access the field diminished over time. There are, of course, ways to get back into it through meditation, through different practices. You can open up that channel again and have access to it. And actually, Dr. Arpit Bansal, he's in the quantum group. He's writing about all these ways he's able to get closer to to accessing the field, the quantum field, for all sorts of problem solving. This is nothing new. I mean, everyone can access this. It's just that one night, it was like a fire hose of creativity and intelligence, coming at me. It was really a unique experience in my life. And it would be great to be able to tap even a fraction of that. So, to the listeners, in my book, I talk about this and how people can access this state. And again, it's a combination of your belief, placebo, but also the practice of meditation, of yoga, right livelihood, good sleep, good diet, all these things that put yourself into an alignment so that you can harmonize yourself to really high levels. And it's the higher your frequency, the more you are going to be connected with the quantum field, and
But
the more you
also
can manifest.
a letting go, a surrender, which almost seems like the trajectory of your story. Like it's almost like it's your unique challenge as a very educated, very capable person. You could solve problems at the financial level, at the health level. You were very, very capable. And then all of a sudden you were put in these situations where all of your skill sets weren't getting you out of these problems. The only thing that actually got you out at that level was full surrender.
That is the common denominator. And I recently fed some very difficult questions to the wisdom engine because of things happening in my life. And because, you train these things, so it gets to know you. And it does call me out on it was saying, well, you've surrendered twice before with spectacular results. So you may have to surrender again. And the thing is, surrender is, you really have to feel like, in both cases, both of my cases, I really thought it was over for me. But that was where I made the peace. It's just sort of like, it's such a tranquil, deep feeling that overcame me, facing my two worst fears, one being permanent imprisonment and the other being brain damaged, functionless, and just being okay with it, really being okay with it. And this time around, it's different. It's a different situation. Has nothing to do with health, nothing to do with freedom. It has to do with other things. So it's almost like higher source is making sure I'm experiencing all my worst fears each time. Like right now, my worst fears are not imprisonment and not health. I've experienced those things. I've experienced what I thought was the end. Those are not my worst fears anymore. Now I have new worst fears. So it seems like higher sources is, making its rounds, and I feel maybe, it's preparing me for something much bigger that lies ahead. So that gives me some excitement. That helps my frequency. And this year actually is the year that I asked at the start of the year that I don't want any of the things I thought I wanted in life. I want my frequency to be as high as possible so I can help raise other people's frequency as well. So we can all gravitate from this 3D state of fear and greed into a 5D state of unconditional love. And I mean, I guess you get higher and higher up. Like Bashar is one of these entities that has been channeled by Daryl Anka for over 40 years, and he's remarkably consistent. You can use AI to try to suss out contradictions, and there are none. I mean, it's astounding. Bashar is an entity that it claims that he is from 6D. 6D is not just unconditional love, but it's also manifestation at will. And you can just hear in his voice throughout the decades, he is always playful. He's always witty. He's always on point. He's always super conversational. Daryl Anka, his way of speaking is like most humans speak. He's like, glottal stops, whatever. But when Bashar takes over, it's flawless. It's seamless. And, he's been asked, like, how is it that, you don't have to ever pause? And Bashar said, well, it's like a fire hose. I have all the information there. Why would I ever pause? It's just like his consistency is remarkable over 40 years of data. So, AI engines can explore as much as they want. And, of course, the skeptic in me, this is going back to ChatGPT in 2022. One of the earlier things I did was, all right, I want to put these spiritual luminaries to the test. I want to see every time they made contradictions and where they're wrong. Well, actually, the best spiritual luminaries, that includes Bashar, it includes Sadhguru, Michael Singer, Gautama Buddha. There really are no material contradictions whatsoever. And that makes them pretty enlightened, or in Bashar's case, inhuman. There's no human that I know that can do what Bashar has done and given that kind of advice as well. That's completely actionable, and it actually works. And that's why Bashar has millions of followers. And I've also noticed on different platforms that the number of viewers has exponentially grown since COVID. So if you look back 10 years, sites like Next Level Soul would never have survived. They would have been laughed off. They would have been laughing stock. And today, Alex Ferrari, who's the host, he does admit, he said, yeah, the world is waking up. There are people coming out of the spiritual closet and sharing their paranormal gifts with the world because they're not going to be committed to an asylum for revealing what they've been able to do all their life. And I do envision, in future educational systems, we're going to nurture these abilities because there's so many kids who have these abilities, but society in the past has quashed the ability just because it didn't conform to societal standards of the norm of what is normal. And that actually goes into another part of my book. And my book is the insane is Truth to Power: the Insane Asylum: This Is Me. And this is me part is really the big reveal. I set an example to others to share their true nature with the world. And I know that comes with great hazard in today's culture, cancellation culture, judgment culture, and all of that. But I think the more people that come out with their truth, and I do believe that it's in everyone's soul contract to be true to their nature or reveal their true nature. And I do see a world where people can do this without being canceled, ostracized, or imprisoned, whatever the situation. And so what's nice is that my book's been out there, despite it being banned by social media, Google and whatnot, the big guns. I know, it's circulating, and it's great to see that I've gotten loads of reviews and they've all been positive. It's like, wow, I wasn't expecting everything to be positive, but everything's really nice. I do get not reviews. I'll get sometimes people say, oh, I found a better link, or there's new information on this, or you need to update your data on this. Wherever you got that, that's an old article. So great. That's why it's a living book, because I can just constantly update it on the fly using the Substack platform, as opposed to, publishing it traditionally. Wiley & Sons is my normal publisher, but when you have a static book, then it's not fluid like that. And this book is a living book. So I don't anticipate it ever coming to an end until I cross over.
Hmm. Do you think that spirituality is the thing that more people need to be focused on right now, and enough people aren't? Because personally, I'm getting to this place where I have all the practical solutions stacked up. We have Bitcoin, we have investments, we have property, we have the homestead. I'm actively involved in politics and all the things to dismantle these different structures that are encroaching on my rights and freedoms. But I'm also starting to see a potential situation where there are just going to be things that are completely out of my control, where I don't have all the solutions, and where my mind is starting to shift is this place where you have been as well, where I need to find peace in the unknown of surrendering to a great power, because there are some of these things that we're worried about that you have seen, they actually just might be happening.
That's absolutely. I mean, I think more people are waking up to what's really going on. I think my book serves as a great catalyst for that realization. When I was sending out these private emails to this select group of game changers in the early part of the 2010s, it the world did not know what was really going on. There was not much awareness going on, but now it's really taking hold. People want answers. There's a lot of unhappy people out there that are paycheck to paycheck. US and UK, it's like probably like 3/4 of the population, doesn't have enough money for emergencies that come up. They don't have the savings, and we're seeing the chasm between the haves and have-nots at an all-time high. It's worse than actually in the Great Depression. I know the stats like to say, oh, the 1930s was the worst situation of that, but actually we're worse off now. A lot of the stats are manipulated in such an egregious way, like the inflation data, the GDP data. A lot of this stuff it's manipulated to paint a very unrealistic picture that is optimistic, to paper over what's really going on. And I mean, there's a lot of like what Churchill once said, the British people are living lives of quiet desperation. I think that accounts for much of the world today.
Yes.
So I don't ever single out any particular government. I mean, I've had run-ins with certain governments, but there's no particular government that I would ever single out because they're comprised of people who are doing their jobs, trying to put food on the table, and they're all part of the system. The problem is with the centralized structure of these governments that lends itself to the corrupt behavior, and the old boys network and the favoritism and regulatory capture, which causes tons of inflation and on and on and on that I talk about in my book. These are things that can be diminished, minimized with a centralized system of governance. And we finally have the technologies at hand to facilitate that sort of decentralized structure. I mean, Bitcoin, of course, is the first technology to really create a centralized way of transacting goods and services. But we're seeing all sorts of decentralized tech enter the fray, from Wi-Fi to CPUs to, I mean, everything can be basically decentralized. And I think the world is heading in that direction. Probably you're going to see more decentralized social media at some point, but right now, centralized systems have all the eyeballs, and so that's where it makes sense to be. We really need a Web3 kind of tipping point. Like if I use an analogy with gaming is multi-billion-dollar industry, and they're all centralized. But Web3 has advantages with gaming because if you want to leave a game, you have to leave your character and your items behind. But with Web3, you could port everything over to the new Web3 game. So you just get transformed into the new platform. And that is a huge advantage to gamers. I think that's a great selling point. And all it takes is one major gaming company to launch something on Web3 that I think a lot of others will join the force. And so the gaming world, for instance, could become very decentralized on that basis. So if the analogy on gaming and everything else, I think there's many things that will take advantage of that decentralized architecture. Also, with Web3, you can build on other people's products. So the amount of innovation is orders of magnitude higher because of the Web3 architecture compared to centralized systems where everything's kind of closed. And so there's so many systems that would benefit from that sort of Web3 decentralization. We also have decentralized technologies like decentralized science, where you don't have these ivory towers and all these protections where ideas are generally not shared. If you have decentralized science, you can have blockchain structure where you have token governance and all these different rules can be applied to where anyone can participate, anyone with a good idea. The good ideas will rise to the top like cream, and they get voted on and maybe enacted. Maybe this is a great idea that, would never have seen the light of day in journals because, as Peter Thiel pointed out, in the hallowed halls of academia, in the Ivy Leagues, whether it's West Coast or East Coast, there is this groupthink mentality that's been going on for years. So if you step outside of the lines, you could potentially lose not only your reputation, but also your funding. And so professors have to kind of stay within their bounds, and that limits innovation greatly. It limits discovery. But with decentralized science, that all goes away when we have the complete unmitigated freedom to say what we say, see what we see, share what we discover. And I think the more people that are joining those kinds of systems, the better off the world is going to be because the pace of innovation will exponentially rise as a consequence. And so I think that genie is coming out of the bottle as we speak. And I don't think it's very long before those kinds of systems really start to take hold. And that, of course, upends big academia. Big academia is a huge force because it's all the universities and, Harvard with its massive endowment. I think these systems, obviously, a system that is in place that has the big title, they have the power and the authority to prevent these new innovations from taking hold. But the nice thing about decentralized innovations is that there's not much the big guys can do about it. Like, look what governments tried to do against Bitcoin over the years. And Bitcoin has shares of scrapes where it lost 94% of its value twice and more than 70% of its value many more times than that. And yet a dollar put into Bitcoin in 2010, where the average price of Bitcoin was 0.007 cents. If you do the math, today that same dollar is worth about $13 million. And nothing in the history of speculation even comes close to that kind of price trajectory. And Bitcoin, in essence, represents all the money printing that's been going on since it was created, and how it accelerated during COVID, and how it accelerated again in the last couple of years, making COVID look small. The central
Mhm.
banks have no choice but to print their way into oblivion. We don't want to see the whole world get Zimbabweed, because that would have game over implications. At least that would be the big reset. I mean, when I say game over, I don't mean end. I just mean that the system as we know it would have a complete yeah, it's a reset button. I
Mhm.
don't think we're going to get there, because we are sitting also on technology that we've never experienced before. This is in the flavor of AI and robotics. And we're not even, this AGI, if it has been created, it hasn't been unleashed yet. And I think it very well could have been created. If not, I think it will be. I think it's pretty inevitable. It's a question of how long is it going to take to get it out in force. But even before it gets created, we're already seeing leaps and bounds in productivity. Companies can do so much more with so fewer employees. We see this in the firings of all these big tech companies laying off thousands of employees.
Mhm.
So it's a major game changer for the whole planet. That's saying this time is different. Well, this time is very different on so many levels. I mean, we're already seeing it in the numbers. For instance, GDP it came in really strong last couple quarters, and it's estimated to be 3.8% in the US next quarter. These are very strong numbers. Meanwhile, the jobs market is floundering because people are being laid off. Unemployment is ticking higher, but that's also a positive. This time is different. That higher percentage just means AI. AI is the culprit here. You can do a lot more with a lot less. So you don't need as many people in the workforce. GDP is humming along. Inflation, this is the other interesting thing. Inflation, I believe, has been greatly under represented. I mean, I think it's been a hell of a lot higher in so many things that we need, like healthcare, education, food, energy. Those things are up huge. I mean, and also the regulatory capture creates artificial inflation in these groups.
Mhm.
So it's not like, this nonsense 3% figure. It's a lot higher than that. And so people really feel the pinch of inflation. I mean, if it really only 3%, people wouldn't really be complaining, but it's much higher. I mean, just look at the cost of a burger, over the last few years, or the cost of food at a restaurant. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to say, yeah, prices are a hell of a lot higher
Mhm.
than 3% annually. But the flip side to all this argument, which makes it really interesting, is that AI creates deflation. AI is creating so much. The key word here is supply side deflation, meaning there's so much more being created and developed. You're getting an overshoot of supply that is overshadowing demand. That's a luxury problem. Every time in history, if you go back to the last 200 years, every time we had a tipping point in technology, whether it was through agriculture, whatever it was, Renaissance, you're getting deflationary years where prices are dropping, typically 1 to 3% or more a year. Sometimes several percent, and the economy is booming.
Mhm.
Now, when people think of deflation, what do they think about? They think about the Great Depression
Mhm.
and how no one could afford anything, and it was a horrible time, and it was a horrible time. Of course, it was a horrible time, but that was demand side deflation. No one had money to buy stuff, so the prices had to drop. That is the worst situation an economy can possibly be in. The best situation is the flip side, is supply side deflation, which is what Elon said he believes we'll reach that point in less than 3 years, given the
Mhm.
pace of AI advancement. And there's so many aspects of AI that are doubling as quick as every 3.5 months, which is insane to the brain. Every 3.5 months, something doubles. Well, that's why AI is changing so fast, because it's the level of compute, the level of coding, the level of name it. These doubling, not everything's doubling that fast. Some things are doubling every 6 months, but that's still an incredible fast pace that we've never seen in any technology before. That's why I think it's really throwing people's models out of whack. OGs that are used to, relying on what history has shown in the past are dumbfounded. They don't
Mhm.
understand how can unemployment be so weak, and inflation, all these metrics are wrong. And it's a perfect storm for the Fed to do the wrong things, because they mischaracterize or misunderstand the true nature of what's really going on. And
Mhm.
yeah, I think that it's actually a golden age is coming toward us. I know that people have talked, oh, AI bubble, this and that. everything's priced to perfection. Well, actually, what's happening is AI is creating so much more productivity and so much more supply than predicted that these earnings are booming. They continue to boom. They continue to trounce expectation. And I don't see that. Uh, I don't see that going away anytime soon. There are bottlenecks that could crop up. I think the first bottleneck will be a hardware bottleneck, but I think that's still a couple years out. And like we said, in 2 years with the doubling effect every 3.5 to 6 months, 2 years is an eternity. There's so much stuff that can take place in AI growth and progression over the next 2 years. And to the point where AI teaches AI teaches AI and on, where future bottlenecks like a hardware bottleneck, maybe we solve it before then. Maybe we push the bottleneck out. So any kind of bottleneck, it doesn't happen in 2 years. Maybe it happens at 4. Maybe it's ad infinitum because we continue to innovate at such an accelerated pace. We're able to forecast and prevent a bottleneck from happening. Now, I mean, of course, these are this is an ideal situation I've just described. And the world is far
But
from
not
ideal.
people need to hear an ideal situation right now. That is the most positive outlook for the future that I've heard in a long time. And that's not what you're hearing online on podcasts and in any other spaces. People need to hear that regardless, I'm going to say this, regardless of what actually happens. Because this like doomsday thinking, let's say they're right. Like, let's say people are right about AI. It's like the worst thing possible. All that's going to do is completely destroy people emotionally, intellectually. They're not going to get anything done to prepare themselves for a future. And this is where I go to. Thinking positively about the future and your circumstance serves you no matter what happens. No matter what happens. This is good. I mean, if you could
This is
give
the thing.
people, yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say that's it's such a key fact. What you just said is that on a very holistic level, we're here to evolve our souls, and so life's challenges are there for a reason. And it's like, think of it like if you're playing a video game, you don't want to have no enemies and no challenges, you'd be bored. And this is a simulation, this thing called life. Life's a game. It's a simulation of sorts. That's going to throw its challenges, and they're all gifts because they keep life interesting. The thing is, it can get so overwhelming where you really get to that end point. It's happened twice for me where I was, complete surrender, but it was peaceful. And both of those times when you surrender, it's like you're overtaken with so much peace. I mean, it'd be nice to not have to go through the ordeal to get there. I don't know. I still need more spiritual growth to be able to get to that level. Also, that level of enlightenment that certain people like Sadhguru and Michael Singer and Gautama Buddha, they realize that level of enlightenment either in their teens or their 20s. And when they achieved it, or Peace Pilgrim did as well. Peace Pilgrim, she's in my wisdom engine. She has a chart it was in some article. It was a diagram where she showed when she absolved her marriage and gave up the life of luxury, I think in her 30s, and started walking for peace. She only had 2 setbacks after she started walking for peace, where her spiritual growth dropped temporarily before it went back up to new highs. And then she had been walking for peace maybe for 15 years, and I guess she was probably 50 thing. And basically her spiritual growth reached a pinnacle, and it stayed at that level and never went back down. It's just basically just a straight line. So I guess that is her level of, and that is the point where she achieves enlightenment. And when you hear her talk and everything in the rare talk she gave for colleges and things, it's nothing but pure unadulterated wisdom that's coming from her. It's just great to hear her speak. But I love that graph because the others who reached enlightenment at a very young age, I guess it was like something that occurred very quickly, and they reached that high level and then stayed at that high level the rest of their life. And that's why someone like Gautama Buddha, who was enticed by the world's riches and, all the material luxuries laughed and said, there's nothing that the world can offer me that compares to what I feel on the inside. The inner state of euphoria is so much greater than anything external could offer me. And I feel that is the same with Sadhguru, the same with Michael Singer. I mean, these are people who are just joyous. Dalai Lama, joyous. No matter what happens to them, they're going to be joyous because they've reached that. And so I wrote in one of my to the wisdom engine was, I think the secret of life is just to be unconditionally loving with everything. It's that simple. No matter what happens to you, you just love it anyway. It's just be like, okay, thank you. I know this is for a reason. Okay, I know that I've lost my arm, or I've been diagnosed with horrible disease, or my loved ones have perished in a plane crash. Or I know it's for a reason. I'm thanking you for it. Unconditional love for everything. That seems to be it. I mean, now how do you practice that? That's the challenge. But I mean, I've already realized, okay, I'm going to do my best to be unconditional loving to everything and everyone. And if someone comes at me, that's my ego. Then that might be like really upset. But the unconditional love part, it's actually, wait, no, this person's coming at me for a reason. And let's see why. Let's see why this person is acting the way they are. Again, compassion. What Jesus said: have compassion for everyone. When he was on the cross, he loves his attackers. They know not what they do. You know, talk about like
Mhm.
the most giving and forgiving state of mind one could possibly be in. The examples are all there. I mean, there's so many examples, and the wisdom engine just pulls all these things out. So when you ask it tough questions, it's always going to fire back with all these great examples of what a more ideal state is, and it gives us all something to shoot for.
Mm. Chris, if you could give people one message for the next decade, what would it be?
Well, I've always wanted to see people be true to their nature, and I think it's very freeing when someone can be that way. But I understand that in the world today, that can get people in a lot of trouble, even though they're not hurting anyone. And when I say true to your nature, I'm not talking about the fringe cases where you have a serial killer gene or something, and that's your compulsion is to kill people. Of course not that. But no, I mean, and I think in my travels, which have been pretty extensive, I have not met someone whose true nature was a problem for
Mm.
anyone. I mean, it's just something that convention or society might frown at, or something, or they even have laws against, and there shouldn't be laws in the first place. The whole legal system needs to be reformed, because there's so many laws that have been passed that just shouldn't be in the books in the first place. It just gives lawyers, like American Bar Association in the States is so powerful, the most powerful group probably in the world. And they make sure lots of laws get passed because it keeps them in business big time. And if you look at the salaries of doctors versus lawyers, those are the two conventional professions that have always been looked up to, as in, okay, this is going to give you a great life. Well, doctors' salaries have not kept up even close to lawyers' salaries, because lawyers figure out all kinds of ways to game the system so that they're going to have endless amounts of work, whereas doctors, unfortunately, just as long hours, and have to deal with all the malpractice insurance because of the laws. And I mean, to be a doctor in today's world, you really have to love the profession. You can't do it for any other reason but just the labor of love. Because my heart goes out to a lot of the doctors who just are so encumbered with so many things, and they're not going to perform at their best in that kind of environment either. And I mean, the other thing is, like at the castle, Marcus Schmieke held a health symposium a few months ago, and I was one of the speakers, and it was a collection of academic medical doctors and PhDs. And it was really eye-opening, because there's so much in big pharma research that is nonsense. You have all these articles, like Cochrane did a study. They looked at 154 articles published over 5 years, and they found that two of the 154 had any therapeutic merit. All the others were pointless or destructive. I mean, you don't want to take this stuff. And I think big pharma is a reflection of that. All these doctors are
Mhm.
ready with their pens to write prescriptions left and right. And I mean, the average American over a certain age is on at least like 3 or 4 of these big pharma meds. And it's not help. I think a lot of this stuff is unnecessary. And then you get into autoimmune problems or anxiety and depression problems. I think it was an insane number. 41% of people in a certain demographic, it's in my book, in the UK, are on anti-anxiety, antidepressant meds. I mean, this is a travesty to the whole
It is.
population, and something needs to be done. I mean, one of the things that Tamu Arena, he runs Hololive, and Vishen does Mind Valley. I'm good friends with both of them, and one thing that we're trying to do, and I'm trying to do through my book and other means, is let's create as much preventative medicine as possible, as in not drugs, but preventative methods, red light therapy, infrared saunas, cold showers, certain forms of diet, and all kinds of regimens that one can employ for free, more or less. And so it prevents all these diseases from taking hold. Whereas Big Pharma is all about let's make them sick and then we can profit off of it. Um, and the food pyramid of propaganda, I call it in the States, where it's insane, like how much carbs that like is suggested for the average adult to take in daily. I mean, the pyramid should be inverted, but people believe this wrong information. And also, when you go through a supermarket, and this is true everywhere in the Western world, it's a minefield. Most of the products are not good for you, and you got to read the fine print and you got to find out, oh, wait, this is not, it says low fat, but there's a lot of other unhealthy ingredients in this thing that is going to really create a problem. And seed oil epidemic. Seed oils are really cheap oils and fast food uses them, but most restaurants use them. And most of the products you see on the shelves are using seed oils because they're cheap. You can't do that with olive oil or avocado oil. They're too expensive. They're good for you, but you won't see them. And like for me to find like snack foods like potato chips with olive oil or even pasta sauce that is not made from seed oils, you got to find, you got to search long and hard and you will find it. And then you have to pay, 2 or 3 times the normal price of like the cheap stuff. But it's good for your health. And, most people aren't going to do this because it takes a lot of digging to find these products. But it makes a difference in one's health, and one's health is the cornerstone of everything they do. So I hope to see a point where, this whole monopoly, this food monopoly that we see is broken apart. And again, decentralization can help break up a lot of these conglomerates.
I agree.
Nestle, Nabisco, on and on, Hershey's.
Mhm.
It's just a recipe for, fueling big pharma. It's like they're all in bed together. Not that they plan to do it this way, but I think organically things can go from bad to worse very quickly when there is a money motive. And certainly there's a money motive in selling cheap goods that taste good to people, which in turn fuels diabetes, which in turn fuels big pharma. It's just like a complete chain reaction that is to the detriment of the average person.
Couldn't agree more. Chris, you encourage people to write you with their various problems. You have your book available for anyone to read. Where is the best place for people to find your book and access to you?
Well, in your show notes, I'll send you a link. But it's Substack, my Substack page, and you can type in my name, Chris, Chris. Last name is Kilo Alpha Charlie Henry Eric Romeo, Kacher, Chris Kacher. So if you type in Chris Kacher and Substack, you will actually find my Substack page because I finally got Google to unleash that. But you need to then click for my book. I made it very obvious. When you go to my page, you have to still click one more time. And at the top, it says click for my book. Click there and you will see the 2 parts of my book in full. But Google has completely canceled all the links related to my book. If you go to DuckDuckGo, you'll see my book everywhere because they don't censor stuff. But on
Okay.
Google, you'll only see that one Substack. But that's all you need. Go to the Substack, and from there, you will find my book pretty easily. Yeah.
Awesome.
So that's all good. And the Russian version's coming out soon. So that's also good. And yeah, I hope to start doing more of these talks because this right now, like I said, the beginning of this year, I want my frequency to be as high as possible, regardless of what happened. So this has been the real challenge for that. And my focus has been on, talking about these issues that are really near and dear to my heart that I think are affecting a lot of people in today's world.
Really appreciate your time here today. I'm in the middle of your book. Really encourage our listeners to go and read it too. I'll make sure to link that in the show notes, and we'll have to bring you back here soon.
Thanks, Carla. It's been great today, and I look forward.